Order. Good morning to everybody. Great crowd here today. Appreciate you all being here and look forward to the conversations. Everybody survived graduation last week. There you go. Especially the ones that graduated are especially, yeah, they're still celebrating from last weekend, but congratulations and again, great to see you all. Of course, our CFOs are typically here, but also want to recognize Luther Lee, who's the Vice President of Finance at Washburn University, for joining us today. Maybe getting some cliff notes as he watches his counterparts make your proposals, because I believe Washburn will do that a little bit later. So Luther, appreciate you being with us this morning. All right. First of all, with old business, would ask for approval or any consideration of the minutes from the April 17th meeting. Any discussion on that? If not, would entertain a motion to approve.
I will.
Motion from Regent Parasker. Second by Regent Dicus. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
We look like we're in COVID over here with the.
Yeah, I know. Plenty of space.
You like each other.
Yeah, we do. All right. Follow up on any issues raised during the April 30th conference call. I wasn't able to be on that, but I understand there were no issues that needed follow-up discussion. All right. Hearing none, moving into new business. Elaine, any board agenda items under fiscal affairs for this afternoon's meeting that we need to discuss this morning?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to call the committee's attention to this month's consent agenda, starting on page 34. Item number 9, act on Canada's comprehensive grant program distributions. This is actually for 2 fiscal years, 25 and 26. The narrative that's noted here about the legislative proviso and how the funds are to be distributed is all accurate. We did, since the publication of this agenda, make 3 changes, and in front of you at your place are 3 new tables, pages 36, 37, and 38. And there are 3 changes to that information. And because it's on consent, I want to call that out and just explain the variations. And I will mention this in your committee report, Mr. Chairman, so this is all clear to everyone. The totals for each sector for the base appropriations do not change. What is different is how the private institutions wish to divide the monies amongst their sector, and actually are going back to the original idea, which is everyone will go up at the same rate of increase. And I believe for the private institutions, everybody will get roughly a 54% increase in their share of the funding of their 50%. What is also different is on page 2 or table 2, the Berkeley College had originally attested they did not meet the match requirement for fiscal year 23 and would need to return funds to us and we would reallocate them. They have now clarified that in fact they did meet their match requirement. So there is slightly less funding to be redistributed amongst the other schools. And then Berkeley also gets, I think, $1,500. So you'll see that noted on table 2. That affects the next year's funding on a one-time basis. And then table 326 is also reflecting the same proportions as in 25. And in each case, the private institutions get exactly 50% and the public institutions get exactly 50% of the amounts. And then the other change is rather inside baseball. In the past, we had, for many years, the funding for this program languished at the same amount. We had a legal base allocation that's mentioned in statute, so that does not change. But the other new layers of state funding we're consolidating, so there's just one rather than multiple, and so it gets confusing. When we first got the new layer of funding, we called it state match funding, but now the entirety of the institution's funding is met with a match. It's on a one-to-one basis. So we thought it would be easier if we just had 2 categories, what's in the statute for the legal base and then KCG state funding. So those are the 3 structural changes there.
All right. Thank you, Vice President Frisbee. Any questions or clarifications needed? Yes, Regent Dicus.
I know I should have probably asked this last year. Why does state funding go to private colleges?
The private institutions, the private independent institutions do participate in many of our state programs as a way of the state trying to find methods to support Kansas students. So they're Kansas residents and trying to support their interest in going somewhere within the state. So potentially they remain in our state when they graduate.
Checking.
Very good response. Any other questions? All right. Elaine, any other items on the consent or discussion agenda that we need to?
I think everything else, Mr. Chairman, I think is we've gone over in some fashion. The J-cert budgets are there. Apologies for the small numbers on some of the pages. That when you get all that information on one page, it gets rather small. But I hope that's all clear. We do have a few capital items for consent that we've talked about. And then we do have the need-based aid funding and some other two items that would just happen to be appropriated in the bill to the Board of Regents, but really belong to universities. So we suggest that that just be moved.
Okay, very good. All right, any other questions or discussion? All right, moving on. Thank you, Elaine. Moving on now, presentations by chief financial officers and student government representatives. Yes.
So if I could just give a little introduction, before we go through to all of the CFOs and the student representatives who are going to talk about their presentations, and we've got a clicker at the podium for folks to go through their slides. I do just want to give a little bit more background on the separate information that you've been given. And of course, I do have additional information to hand out to you. You have in front of you, or it's been emailed to you, the entirety, I think it's about 90 some pages of information from the universities. We did find one page in Fort Hayes request related to fees that rolls up to table 3. So I'm going to give you some replacement pages. The change is very small on a dollar basis, but it is, we want it correct in the record.
Sure.
So we'll get you corrected pages there. The information in its entirety is also posted on our website now on our agendas page, so the public can access that information. And then late last week, we gave the board additional, I'm going to call it supplemental information, and you do have a copy of this in front of you. From each of the campuses, if their tuition adjustment for the base rates were reduced to either 2 or 3%, what would that effect be for the campuses? That information has been given to you, as well as a table. And this is part of what's published online. There's a one-page table that just highlights, going back from 2020 through 2025, the tuition and required fees by semester for undergraduate resident students. How has that increased over time? And how does that compare to inflation? And we use 2 markers of inflation. We show CPI, the traditional consumer price index, which just came out this morning for April 2024. So this has been updated for that. So looking back from 2020 April and to April 2024, the rate of CPI for that timeframe is 22.3%. And so you can see that similar timeline then. If you add on the 25 proposals, what the rate of change is for the 6 universities for undergraduate resident students. And in a very odd anomaly, HEPI, the Higher Education Price Index, a measure published by Common Fund that looks at the basket of goods that institutions typically purchase rather than a consumer, their rate of inflation is only 15.7%, looking 2020 through 2024. So trying to give you some context there for that. So we'll give you this. This is part of the information that's posted on our website.
Okay. Thank you, Elaine. And really before I call up our CFOs, just kind of take a step back, because as a new regent last year, I always try to look at if someone were watching fiscal affairs for the first time, and if they're just going through this process, I just kind of wanted to back up a step and maybe kind of set the stage. The setting and consideration and setting of tuition is really one of the most important responsibilities of the Board of Regents. And certainly we understand that cost and controlling cost is important to everyone. We've got a lot of constituencies that are watching this discussion. Greatly appreciate the CFOs for the work that they have done in crafting proposals that keep that affordability in mind. because it is important, especially, with inflation and everything else that's making everything more expensive. We appreciate the efforts that the CFOs have taken to craft a tuition proposal that keeps that in mind, but also allows for the campuses to function efficiently. So as Elaine said, also appreciate the CFOs. We've requested some additional information that you provided to us late last week, and know that you're always busy, but especially appreciate you responding to those requests. And look forward to a robust conversation. This is a first read. I think that's important for everybody watching. We'll discuss it in fiscal affairs. We'll discuss it this afternoon in the full board meeting. But even this afternoon, it's still just a first read. We won't actually take action until we come back in June. But it's probably not good practice to ask questions before the first presentation is even made. But for me personally, what I will be looking for, and it was reflected in some of the proposals, is obviously tuition gets a lot of attention, as it should. But I think for most Kansas families that are attending our institutions, it's all one pot that it comes out of. So what's the overall effect of the cost of attending our institutions? Because sometimes you can increase tuition and that'll get a lot of attention, but if you're cutting cost in other areas, the net result can be a lot less than the tuition increase. So if that's not reflected in your proposal, I would appreciate if you would just make that clear at some point in your proposal. But with that, it's one reason that we started a little bit earlier today to make sure that we give our institutions enough time to go through this. So we're going to ask you as much as possible to try to limit your proposal to about 8 to 10 minutes, if at all possible. That'll then give us an opportunity to ask follow-up questions, and just look forward to the conversation because it's something that affects all of our institutions and all of the students and their families. So with that, I believe Jeff DeWitt and the University of Kansas is up first. Welcome, Jeff.
There's a button right there. Yeah.
I'm going to walk you through our tuition proposal. And really, you're going to see me talk a lot about operating margin, because it was a little over 3 years ago. We were facing a $50 million structural deficit. We were spending $50 million more than we were bringing in. And you'll see that reflected in how this proposal gets us to we're finally at a balanced budget in 2025. And the things that we need to do that to get to deal with that going forward. So I'm going to walk you through that about the proposal. So I'm going to talk about the basis for the proposed tuition and fees, and I'll cover both the medical center and the Lawrence Edwards campus as well. I'm going to talk about the priorities that are funded by these proposals, tuition and fee proposal highlights, and then I'll talk about the proposed increase to required student fees and student fee alignment. And I'll have my colleague, I will call him, he just graduated, Camden Baxter, come up from Student Senate to talk about their process on that at the end, but I'll walk you through all that. So what's the basis of a proposed tuition and fees? We don't really like to have to raise tuition. We really would prefer to not do that, but there are a lot of challenges that we have to deal with, and not the least of them, the thing Elaine just brought up, the inflation during that period. KU did not have a tuition increase for 5 years until last year. And it was 5%. And then we're looking at 3.5% this year. So that's 8.5% over 6 years that we're looking at that. And you'll see how we did that in just a minute. The goal of this tuition increase and the proposal is to eliminate our structural deficit. We are using a whole lot of strategic initiatives that I can get into detail about, that are designed to generate operating margins in the future to deal with our facilities, our market pay, all the things that we need to do, cybersecurity risk, IT risk, all those types of things. Those strategic initiatives are designed in the future and in the present to generate operating margins. But first and foremost, you got to get to break even. And that's been quite a journey the last 3 years. We're funding university priorities crucial to our mission: research, teaching, student retention, student success, all those types of things, and the state of Kansas economy. We have the largest out-of-state student population we've ever had. We were at 35% or so 10 years ago. We're over 42% now, largest number. And a third of those people stay and work in the state. So we're a big generator of the workforce of the future of the Kansas economy, which you heard about in the past. And the other issue is remain competitive with our peer institutions. We can price ourselves out of the market. We can make it unaffordable. So we have to balance all that with being competitive with our peer institutions and making this where we can, particularly given our out-of-state focus, bringing those students in, we got to remain competitive there. Since 2019, we've done significant budget reductions. You'll see a chart on that in a minute. We've just continued 78 programs since 2021. And we've got a whole slew of strategic initiatives we're doing, from continuous improvement to be more efficient, have better processes, to conference and events. We just last week booked 1,000-person conference for next year. They're going to be there 5 days, $300,000 of gross revenue. Things like, and that's without the convention center being built. So that's just using existing resources. So things like that, strategic enrollment, which is a big factor in us being able to keep tuition affordable, and a whole series of other issues of how we budget, how we do our processes. We're going through a whole series of those, and that is all time consuming. And it's not just the state can't give you all you need. Tuition can't give you all you need. You got to look at what you're doing and how you're doing it as well. Other factors we're considering is the state allocation. The governor's budget originally had a 5% pay pool instead of 2.5%. That's twice as much. And they had an inflation or a base funding amount. We're very appreciative. I think we'll all say this, of the state funding for things like $75 million for our cancer center and the Wichita campus, and a 2.5% pay pool, and the demolition and deferred maintenance money, particularly going forward. But it's really not to your base. It's not helping you with your operating. It's helping you with those one-time things you need to do. So we got to find a way to cover that. We're at the Lawrence campus about 2/3 tuition, 1/3 state funding. It's just the opposite. The medical center, they're about 2/3 state funding and 1/3 tuition. So it affects both those campuses differently. Substantial costs in cybersecurity, utilities, insurance premiums. Our property tax provider has indicated to us we may be seeing a 15% increase in our property tax premiums. Our property insurance premiums, excuse me. Cybersecurity premiums are up over 20% from what they were. Now we have better coverage, more comprehensive, and things like that, but you got to pay for that. And we're all facing those as well as covering costs for additional enrollment. We're fortunate that through our strategic enrollment, we're growing, but the cost of covering that class for next year and the one we had last year, which were record enrollment, we're putting about $10 million into better more advising, more faculty, teaching, and all those types of things you have to do. So growth is not free, but it does help us with our margin, and it's helping us moderate our tuition. This is a chart that when I first got here, and you kind of look at this, I call it one of the most disturbing charts we have at KU. Every star is a budget cut. So from 2014 to 2022, we had budget cuts every single year. The blue are cash flow cuts you had to do to balance the budget in the current year. And then the darker orange ones are actually permanent cuts. And just from 2019 to today, we've had $46 million in budget reductions to control expenses. Because if you're not getting tuition increases for 5 years and state funding is until recently staying relatively flat, how do you balance your budget? And you can see what KU did to do that. So there has been efforts to try to not put this on the back of the students, but to make sure we're doing everything we can to operate effectively. What are we doing with this proposal? What's the purpose of it? Really 3 categories: student success, campus facilities, and our workforce. Student success is fundamental to the mission of the university. We want to increase student retention, graduation rates, and minimize student debt. You have to do that if you're going to go through the enrollment cliff that's coming up and attract those students coming in. You'll see things like a course fee into college is really focused on that first generation college student, that there's a 20% gap of them getting to their sophomore year versus the rest of the university. We need to focus on that. That's kind of where that's going in that area, as well as all the other resources we're putting into that. We put $50 million into student success. We get $2 million from the state in this for the next year, which is we're very grateful for, but we're spending $48 million more than that on student success because of how important it is. It's as important to retain who you have as it is attract new students. And there's an impact of that. Campus facilities, what's necessary to meet our educational, research, and healthcare needs. We are having a difficult time attracting researchers because we need to upgrade our research facilities. And so we need to focus on that. We're needing to address the backlog deferred maintenance we talked about many times in this forum. And the impact of that, just in the next 3 years, we're going to have to find another $20 $29 million a year to get to our deferred maintenance assessment. So we got to get to a zero margin so we can start building a margin to address that. And the other thing is, we're going to be building a cancer center at KUMC. That has operational impacts. And as we're expanding our facilities and doing things, there's a cost of running those. Workforce, this is very, very recent, probably the first time this has ever been made public. We just finished an analysis of our market pay gap for our faculty and staff. It's 27.3 million. So we need to also have a margin, operating margin, to start getting our stuff to market pay. We have 400 faculty and staff that don't make a living wage or below a minimum salary relative to their peers. And so if we're going, the provost will say, I can't say how many times we were on the edge of getting this top researcher and we couldn't match the pay. And so we have to address that. And it's a key element of and this is, it's no different than the state. If you want to be great, you got to have a great workforce to do that. And you got to bring in those top researchers and those top faculty to develop the workforce of the future and do things like working with Panasonic, which we do a lot of that in our engineering department. And then again, addressing employees below living wage and significantly below their peers. We now know what our gap is, and now it's time to start figuring out how to address it. Our tradition proposal is a 3.5% standard tuition rate. We have proposed student fee changes. One of the big things a lot of work was done on is aligning the Lawrence and Edwards campus, which had radically different fees. It was very hard to go back and forth between the two campuses. We've aligned that. It's going to cost $1 million. We're going to lose $1 million out of that. But getting it where it's simpler to not worrying about how, can I take a class on Edwards? It's just really complicated and difficult. So students and faculty and staff spend a whole lot of time aligning that, and the net of it's going to be much easier to go across the campuses. We have 2 proposals in the Doctor of Physical Therapy. This is a hybrid program we expect will generate probably another 186 to 200 more students. It allows you to do online and on campus as opposed to only on campus. This is a big deal for the medical center. And then our undergraduate, we have a certificate there. We're going to align that with standard tuition because you can take the certificate and move on to a bachelor's degree. So we're aligning that as well, just some high levels there. On the course fee side, as I just mentioned, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences has a School of Arts course fee up $12.22. It hasn't been increased since 2019. School of Journalism, a fee hasn't been increased since 2018. School of Law is one of the top public law schools in the United States now, and they were number one in 100% of their graduates passing the bar in a short period of time, and it's one of the lowest cost and most affordable. So this will help us put even more resources into that, and they haven't had an increase since 2019. School of Social Welfare hasn't had an increase since 2016. And then, as I mentioned before, really focus on student success, the course fee, the College of Liberal Arts. All these are competitive with their peers, most all of them below their peers in terms of course fees. And we believe this allows us to do the things we need to do to be successful in those programs. In terms of the question, Regent Benson, you asked, how on the tuition and fees, which is what this chart shows you, we're still going to remain in the lower half and remain competitive. And you'll see many of those, if you look at the star, we don't know what their proposal is. So we may not even go where we are when we see the proposals for these other universities. But based on what we know right now, we're going to stay very competitive with these proposals in this that's before you. This is the last slide before I get into student fees. This just shows you how we burn through our cash intentionally. We took money that we got from the ARPA funds and from the COVID funds and from things we've done through budget cuts and other things, and used our cash reserves to invest in strategic initiatives that are now starting to pay off, like the conference center I just mentioned a minute ago. So these are now getting a return on investment, and we expect in 26, if we can get to this zero margin, which is pretty close to that, that will start going up in the future back to where it was, except we're not going to let it go up. We're going to invest in our facilities and our people. So the margins that are generated beyond that number, we're going to invest into those categories going forward. And on the student fees, the medical center has a very small increase, 0.9%, related to the fact that they now have, they've more than 40% increase in the number of student areas that they support. So they have a small fee increase there. And then on the required campus fees for this Lawrence Edwards campus, you can see the changes there. Most of the changes are related to simplifying student fees. You see the wellness fees going down in terms of dollar change, but we're offering it across both campuses now. There's more people paying into it, but at a lower fee. And really what they're trying to do is address the transportation system, because as we have grown our campus in the next 2 years, you have to deal with transportation, and it's simplifying everything. But the overall impact is a 2.9% below inflation number for student fees. And with that, I'm going to invite my colleague up here, Camden Baxter, who he just graduated. Camden, you want to come up? He just graduated a few days ago, so I don't know how he's feeling with all the celebrations that college students probably do, but he probably doesn't. He's graduated in economics with a degree in economics. He's a member of Phi Beta Kappa. He was the commencement ceremony speaker for that fraternity, and he graduated with university honors with the highest distinction. He is a treasure to KU. I'm sorry to see him graduate. Him and his peers, and he has some of his colleagues here who are going to be taking over next year with him. I'll let him introduce them. I'll let him talk about the process that we went through to do these, and I'm really going to miss him. He's been here the last 2 years with us, and I appreciate what you do, man. And go ahead.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it. I'd also like to mention my colleagues, as Jeff mentioned as well, Megan Stoprin, who will have my job next year, as well as Kevin Nguyen, our incoming treasurer. Without them, our student government would not function. I'm very grateful for their service. Let's go back to the previous slide. As Jeff let it slip, we're asking for a $15 increase, which is just under 3%. I want to walk you through our process first and let you know how we arrived at that figure. Our process is thorough. It spans close to 5 months and begins in mid-October when we elect a committee of 12 representatives that come from all walks of life and background at KU. Includes 3 graduate students, as well as students from a number of majors and, as I mentioned, different backgrounds. Once this committee is selected, we begin a months-long odyssey of working with fee managers, engaging dozens of student leaders, and ultimately convening a week of hearings and deliberations to generate a required campus fee proposal. On the student engagement side, we sent out a campus-wide survey with the support of the university administration, which generated nearly 1,200 responses. While this is certainly by no means near the total enrollment of KU, we are very confident that this is in fact a representative sample, and the survey identified some clear trends in the preferences of the student body that we were fortunate enough to be able to translate into policy. As well as identifying student concerns, as I mentioned, we hosted a week of hearings, which gave us an on-the-ground and in-depth perspective of the financial circumstances faced by each of our roughly 20 fee entities. Some of these, as you can imagine, were quite dire. In the 5 years starting in 2019, obviously the consumer price index has risen 22%. Our student fee has only risen roughly 4% in that time frame. That means that we are 18% down to inflation, and I can assure you that this is reflected in each and every balance sheet that we are required to consider. Now, let's move on to some of the student priorities that our survey identified. Chief among them was transit. Far and away, transportation services were identified by the student body as the most important service to them. And this intuitively makes a lot of sense. It's kind of hard to go to class and get a degree if you can't actually get to class, especially on those KU hills, which are no joke in August heat. I'd also like to mention that students expressed concern in the preservation of essential student services, things that people interact with on a day-to-day basis. And while they may not affect as many people in terms of raw numbers as campus transportation does, those organizations that have felt pressure from inflation were in many cases identified just as important as inflation for the roughly 1,200 for the 1,200 students that filled out our survey. Once we had generated a required campus fee proposal of a $15 increase, this was heard by both the Finance Council and our full student government and received resounding and overwhelming approval in each. In fact, in neither case was a single speech given in opposition. I want to emphasize that the proposal you have in front of you is a consensus of the student leaders of the University of Kansas. I'd also like to remind you all that this is not an arbitrary figure for us. This is not just a concept that we are asking you to raise the student fee by $15. The first conversation we have once we convene a committee is to acknowledge that we are playing with real money that comes from our peers' pockets. It is not lost on us that we are asking you to charge the students of the University of Kansas an additional $15 per semester. We would not have asked for this increase if we did not feel as though this was the absolute bare minimum required to ensure the functionality of our critical services that our students depend on. Transportation, in particular, had to renew its contract and saw an exorbitant increase in costs due in large part to steep rises in insurance premiums, that if we are going to meet the obligation of representing our students, we have to find a way to fund transit. And this $15 increase allows us to do that while also preserving other essential services in the face of unstinting inflation that I'm sure all people in this room can acknowledge has been very difficult for our balance sheets across the university system of Kansas. That's all I have. What questions do you have for me?
That was very well done. Questions for Camden, Regent Winter.
Well done. Thank you for preparing so well. Quick question. What's the Educational Opportunity Fund? And I asked that question because it seems to be the entity that had the biggest reduction in fees.
That's a great question. So the Educational Opportunity Fund is essentially an in-house, I won't say scholarship, but funds a number of opportunities that are essential to students, including the Office of Graduate Studies. So the reason you're seeing an increase is because we moved the Office of Graduate Studies off of the Educational Opportunity Fund to a different funding entity, which is known as block funding. So what you're seeing is actually an accounting trick. While there has been a decrease in the Educational Opportunity Fund, I believe of $1.90, that $1.90 was shifted over to our student government fee, which means that we're still meeting the needs of our graduate students in funding research, et cetera. We're just doing it from a different funding source.
So you're saying that the Educational Opportunity Fund really won't see a decrease in funding?
That is correct, yes. That was, so I would also like to mention there are a number of those proposals, or there are a number of what look like decreases on the proposal that you're probably seeing in front of you. These are, for the most part, just all accounting tricks. I say accounting tricks. I don't mean to be facetious, but seriously, we just move some money around in ways that were more efficient. So please don't, if you have questions, please ask me. But by and large, we're not going around and cutting things willy-nilly, I promise.
Well, I would hope that our economics department is smart enough to teach about these tricks.
Oh, they've let me know, I can assure you.
Now, obviously, I think we all agree that one of the most compelling needs we have is scholarships and access for students. So I appreciate the fact that you figured out a way not to have that negative impact. Thanks.
It's so important to us, yes.
Any other questions for Camden, Regent Dicus?
So with this movement, oops, sorry. Yeah, with this movement, where do those fees show up?
So those fees should show up in what is known as the Student Senate Activity Fee or the Campus Activity Fee. I forget exactly what it's called on the sheet that you have. But our student government fee is what covers the Office of Graduate Studies under the current edition. And I'd also like to add that we ran an internal deficit as a student government in order to meet our needs in order to meet the needs of the student body last year. So the net increase is going to be higher than the $1.90 that got transferred from the Educational Opportunity Fund. But this, just as Jeff is asking for the university level, sets us equal at a point of financial equilibrium. Are you seeing it on your sheet?
So is that the
Dicus?
student organizations and community support line?
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't in some other page.
I appreciate it. It's arcane, I know.
Going back to Regent Benson's comment about the total cost.
Regent Benson, I have a
Yes,
question
Regent
on the student health and wellness. We've had a significant reduction there. We all know that the wellness of the students are increasing, the demands are increasing. How are we justifying that part?
So this is not a reduction in real terms. So in terms of the actual amount of money each student is paying per semester, yes, it is. But as CFO Jeff DeWitt mentioned, we completely restructured the way that we did our campus fees across the Edwards and Lawrence campuses. I won't get into that because I will take the full 2 hours of everybody to explain that. It was extremely complicated. But the gist is that by redistributing and changing and ultimately simplifying our fee structure, the per person cost for health and wellness decreases, which is reflected here. However, because we have more students paying in, the actual revenues are going to be net positive or at the very least net neutral. So we were extremely cautious to ensure that we were taking no action that would be to the detriment of the services that we provide students, which were, of course, identified in our survey as extremely important as well. So I ultimately absolutely agree with you. I can assure you that these are not cuts, even though at the line by line level.
Services are not cut, but the cost of doing that is reduced.
Yes, exactly. On a per student basis, yes.
Sounds good.
Any other questions for Camden this morning? All right. Camden, well done. Yeah. Thank
you
you
all. I
so much for
appreciate it.
joining us and appreciate your comments this morning.
Thank you.
Anything else, Jeff?
Do you have any questions for me? But
Yeah,
See.
that's well done.
yeah.
Jeff, I had a question. You showed a number of a deficit to, I forgot what you called it, but basically the deficit you've got to get to getting staff to market level or wherever that goalpost is. I just want to clarify, is that faculty and support staff?
Yes, it's about
Okay.
$10 million gap on the faculty, on the staff and admin side, and about 17.2 million on the faculty side. These are recently analyzed and developed numbers relative to their peers. So a landscaping person would be compared to the Lawrence market, an accountant would be compared to the Kansas City market. A researcher would be paid compared to their AAU public peers, in
Sure.
terms of that kind of competitive set.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think that's a needed clarification because I think sometimes when people hear staff raises, they automatically assume it's faculty, but they're obviously with all of your institutions. There are a lot of people on campus that help the organization function efficiently that don't actually teach.
I mean, just an example, the landscaping people, which if you go to Lawrence right before graduation is gorgeous. They make way below the Lawrence market and we turn them over quite frequently. They're not making a living wage. And that's some of the things that you want to address to a pay plan is getting people where they want to stay and they can stay. And, you don't want to have them 6 months and they go make $4 more an hour
Sure.
in the private sector. You can't live, you can live that way, but not well. And so those are things we're comprehensively addressing through our market pay study that we will be addressing as we get this to zero. The future margins that all these strategic initiatives generate are going to go to facilities and pay and research and student success, all the missions that we have.
Yeah, support staff incredibly important to our campuses. Do you have a question, Regent Winter?
Thank you, Jeff. If you could be brief about this. I'm interested in the FY 2024 budget versus actual. What's happened? Are you
We're
get
burning through
better
about
than your
80
budget, below your budget? What's happening?
You can see 23 to 24 on the blue chart. We're burning through cash this year.
Right.
But we knew we were going to be, and we're right on target of where we thought we would be. So, I think you may have asked this question a few meetings ago. Are you sure you can land? And the answer is with this proposal, yes, I'm confident that we're going to land and we're going to land at a point where we can go forward and address the challenges that we have.
Thank you.
Any other? Yes, Regent Dykes.
Going back to page 3, I didn't know whether you'd answer this later, so I didn't ask then. The discontinuance of 78 programs, what, just in a general ballpark, what does that save the university?
That's part of our budget cuts that were occurring in 2022. So we had $25 million in budget cuts. So we had early retirement incentives. We had the programs discontinued. We actually reduced some costs in some programs. So it's part of that whole 46 million of cuts that happened between, if you go back to this chart, it's part of that piece there. But a lot of them were programs we just didn't have any enrollment in. And those take over time to, phase those out. But it's part of that whole package of budget reductions that we did from 2019 to 2022.
Okay.
We have a list of all those. If you're so interested in seeing what some of them are, we have that as well.
What was the dollar figure on that budget cut?
It was about 25 million. We had a $50 million structural deficit. We did about half of it in 2022. You see the orange star on over 2022. And the other 25 we've done through efficiencies and strategic initiatives. So a balanced budget was half cuts, half finding other ways to run your university to balance it out. And we're just about there. And this proposal is part of that, hopefully, not hopefully, that strategy that's now playing out.
Yes, Regent Prasker.
Jeff, I wanted to, I know you addressed this in the highlights, but are we also estimating the cost of analyzing the AI effects on technology and on campus? I know you talked about cybersecurity and technology in general, but I would strongly advise start looking at AI impacts
Absolutely.
on the university.
We had a meeting yesterday, the provost and I did, with a consulting firm we have coming in to help us with the strategic plan for IT. And that was a
Should
heavy
include-
duty topic and as well as, cybersecurity and cyber risk. And we're all the border regions, universities are getting together to talk about
Yep.
doing that collectively. But yes, that was one of the topics in the strategic plan that we're going to be rolling out in the summer, was that very topic.
Regent Winter.
Hopefully a quick question, quick answer. Looking back at the last 5 years, can you tell us in approximate terms or percentage terms how much student scholarship money has increased or decreased?
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but the state gave a lot more funding to that, and I don't remember the number off the top of my head. And we've pumped a lot of money into it. Our strategic enrollment strategy, the reason why it's so successful in terms of generating these record enrollments is we're focusing focusing the aid on the students that need it. So we're really diving into that. It helps us attract out-of-state students that can be successful. It helps us focus on our in-state students. I don't have the number. I can get it to you later, but it's a significant increase. We're doing 1.8 million more in this budget than we did last year, which we were at record levels of need-based aid. That's a key to success of making it affordable, is scholarshiping and discounting tuition and things like that.
And by the way, I'm curious about this answer to the same question with respect to the other 5 institutions. Thank you.
Yes, Elaine.
Regent Winter, I sent some information to you, a little trend table looking at state general fund investment in financial aid for the programs that our agency administers. And it's notable, it triples from 24 million to 72 million, from 21 to 25. In some cases, they're creating whole new programs, some of which are graduate level, many of which are service scholarships, which take a toll on our staff to administer. And most of which I believe the private independent institutions participate in as well. So not all of that goes to only public institutions. As well as there's 21, 22, $25 million in the, as noted in the agenda for consent, the need-based aid that is going to the public universities. That includes Washburn.
That
So-
significant state increase is why we were able to do what we did on our strategic enrollment. It was a major factor. If there's one thing that I would say is the most valuable to universities, it's that.
Thank you very much. It just seems to me that in order to analyze the appropriate tuition fee increase, if any, we have to look at the big picture. We have to look at not only the amount of increase, but what resources, if any, are there that have also increased to help students, particularly in needy students. So that's just a precursor. That's what's really important to me, Mr. Chair, about how we address this issue of tuition.
Regent Winter, we're pumping 50 million into student success, and then that does not include scholarshiping. So that's the secret sauce, if you will, to make this all work.
Well said. Any other questions for Jeff and the University of Kansas? All right, thank you, Jeff. Next up, Kansas State University. Welcome, Ethan.
You can just.
Keep clip. Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you for having me here. My sense is you're probably going to hear some of the similar stories from each of the campuses in terms of what the impacts that we're all facing and trying to balance our budgets towards. Eventually I'll get through Jeff's slides. There we go.
Keep going.
One more. Okay. So I'll just kind of dive right on in. For FY 2025, what Kansas State University is requesting is a 2.8% tuition rate increase across to all of our campuses. So that would be our Salina, Vet Med, Olathe, and Manhattan campuses. All residency statuses, graduate and undergraduate. So it's a flat 2.8% across the board. We also have 2 increased requests for some specialized programs, and I'll cover that in a little bit. And then in terms of our student services fee, our student activity fee, the students have elected to keep that rate flat for this next year. And I know they went through a lot of conversations, and Caleb's here, can certainly answer any questions about the conversations they had and deliberations in terms of how to reach to this decision that they had. So first wanted to touch on a little bit the state investments, and we've tried to break them down similar to what I think Jeff had, is what really impacts our general operating base budget. versus those targeted appropriations that we received through the legislature, as well as some one-time funds that we received through the legislature as well. All of the dollars, obviously, we're extremely grateful for, along with our continued funding. But similarly, what you see there is we only received about 4.5 million that impacted our general operating base. And that represents about a 1% of our general operations increase. And so it's a very minimal increase, especially as comparison to the inflationary pressures we're all facing, the need to increase our salaries to remain competitive. All of the sort of stories that Jeff just shared are similar statements that we have on our campus. So when we went through and we looked at the dollars that we have available from the state, we then looked at when we go through our deliberations, we look at what are our investment areas, what are potential rate increases that we might request, and then we look at other actions that we would have available to us to help us balance our budget. And so we went through a lot of deliberation within our university and also with the students and talked about that potential rate increase. So what you see here is just an illustration of our rate has, for the resident undergrad, has only increased 5% since fall 2019. But conversely, if you look at if we had adjusted it per the HEPI, we would have had about a 15% increase over that same period of time. And so over the last 5 years, we have worked incredibly hard to keep those tuition rates low, all the way through a pandemic, also enrollment declines that we experienced as an institution. And I'd point out that this is also an instance where you see the dollars that we didn't receive. So we had, obviously, with your support, requested funds to help with inflationary impacts that we've all seen at the institutions. We didn't receive those. We were anticipating that amount would have been about 1.8 million, and that would have reflected, conversely, about a 1% tuition rate increase. But unfortunately, we didn't receive those dollars, but those costs are still real, and so we're still facing them. So we looked at and talked about what is a tuition rate increase, what would that impact be? But then we also look at our other levers. So we look at what's our student enrollment that we're anticipating next year. We are seeing applications, admissions, housing deposits, new student orientation enrollments. Those are up positively for Kansas State. And so we are anticipating some type of an increase this fall. But we've also talked about the complications that come with the FAFSA rollout, and we anticipate probably a lot higher melt. So even though we've got them signed up and we've got them enrolled, and maybe they're planning out their purple curtains for their residence hall, we anticipate when they get that final FAFSA information, it may impact their decision to attend Kansas State University. And so we are anticipating a lot higher melt than what we might normally do. My office works throughout the year with enrollment management to look at all these different markers and to come up with what we anticipate our enrollment will look like for this next fall. So we are anticipating a modest increase at about a 2%. That's roughly 300 student head count that we would anticipate seeing additional into the pipeline that would generate some additional tuition revenues for us, which we considered as part of our total package when we're looking to balance our budget this next year. The last lever that we obviously have available to us is budget reductions. And so we've elected to do that as well. I would point out this is another year of out of the 7 of the last 10 years, similar to what Jeff demonstrated, we've had budget reductions deployed. Since about 2016, Kansas State University has reduced our tuition budget by about $70 million, all related to our enrollment declines. This was just another reduction that we were going to deploy. We felt it very important that we present a balanced budget, but also a balance in terms of the different levers that we want to deploy between tuition rate increases and budget reductions in order to fund our investments that we're anticipating next year. So where are we putting our dollars? We are deploying some of the funds that we received for faculty and staff compensation. So we're deploying a 2% across the board. We are doing it across the board rather than potentially what you hear from other institutions in terms of targeted. investment areas such as specific categories of faculty or staff. We are conducting a salary study, compensation classification study. We're going to start this summer. That will give us the data that we need and the compensation philosophy that we need to develop at the institution to understand, instead of across the boards, what might be targeted areas that we want to fund so that we can bring salaries up to market and be competitive in the pay that we are offering our faculty and staff. But until then, we've elected to deploy a 2% across the board. Just a reminder, the funds that we got from the state only really cover about 1.25% of that for Kansas State University. So part of our package that we put together was augmenting that to about 2%, using some of the state dollar or some of the tuition rate increase dollars as well as some of our internal reductions that we're going to use. We've got our student success efforts, again, funded through the state. We're extremely grateful for those. But then you'll notice really, and this is K-State specific this year, we are significantly investing in our IT posture as a university. Obviously, you understand the event that we recently went through. That really candidly opened our eyes to the need to have some significant investments in this area to secure our institution, bring more capacity into that cybersecurity, data security, common platforms that we all need to deploy across the institution. So that first line there is additional positions that we're going to have not only within the central IT division, but also some additional capacity we're going to have out in our distributed areas. And then we also have elected to secure some additional monitoring tools, and that's that cybersecurity and university-wide contracts. So we are, unfortunately, those tools are very expensive, but obviously where we're at, we felt it was a necessary investment this year. So and then obviously we also had this insurance rate increases. So when we've talked through with the students, go ahead.
On that, have you shared your experiences with the other universities, and what can we as a group learn when you say you're spending this money? Yeah, Jeff, I don't know whether that was cyber insurance or cyber costs that you talked about.
Cyber insurance.
20%.
Mhm.
Yeah, but insurance, oops. Yeah, cyber insurance is one thing, protecting is
Right.
what is really needed.
So on that point, yes, I've expressed what has occurred at the institution and really try to give as much advice to my colleagues as I could. One of the things that we are doing as a COBO, we are meeting quarterly with our chief information officers now. That's a new action that we've put in place. And part of that effort actually is, which we should be able to bring to you at your August budget workshop, is we've come together to talk about what are potential policies that we would like you all to consider adopting that would then impact all the institutions, anywhere from establishing or requiring each institution to have a security committee that exists and reviews risk that the institutions have, not just IT, but IT would be a big focus. What are some of the cybersecurity frameworks that we should all be commonly adopting and utilizing? And then there'd be some other pieces, all of which we want to use as a mechanism to understand what do we really need to be investing as a system that we could then come to you and ask for your support to approach the legislature for some additional funds to help secure us all. We're all in a new world, and this is critically important for us to get this right. I just wanted to point out too, and I know Caleb's sitting back there, Paige sitting back there. They had to suffer through, I think, about 5 to 6 different meetings with me to talk about our investment areas and our approaches, and the framework that we attempted to make this a very balanced approach to these investments, not just students funding it through a student increase, but also the university committing its own resources to do so. And the Student Tuition and Fee Strategy Committee overwhelmingly supported that investment plan. Here's a look. Again, these are also factors that we are very cognizant of. We want to make sure that when we are potentially considering a rate increase, that we're making sure that we're competitive with our peers. And you'll see here, these are our mostly our actual enrollment competitors, not necessarily our peer and aspirant institutions that we're looking towards from a strategic plan perspective. But we maintained sort of right there in that middle line, our total cost of attendance per semester. So we're looking at it not only just from tuition, but our mandatory fees, our housing and dining rates, meal plans, all those, we look at that.
It's actually on the previous slide. So when you plan to bring the proposal or what we are thinking about for cyber insurance, when we go to insurance companies, they ask us to fill out a survey.
Right.
So I would love to know where we stand on that
So
for the survey.
yeah, we can certainly provide that. I think we're up to submit that again this next cycle. Probably the more relevant one that we want to work towards adopting as a system is probably the NIST security framework.
Yes.
And that would then be I think a lot more holistic review
Yeah.
of our cybersecurity posture and practices.
Yeah.
And so we would anticipate that being a request of the board to consider. We'll adopt that framework, and then each institution then would do an assessment against that to understand
Where they stand right now and where we
Yep.
want to.
That's exactly right. Yep, that would be our approach or
Okay.
desired approach.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I'll touch on real quickly a couple of our specialized fee requests. We've got our physician assistance fee program at Kansas State University requesting a $45 increase per credit hour. All dedicated to procuring the professional instruments that PA students need to have. That way they're provided when they come in rather than asking the students potentially to try to go and secure them on their own. So we felt it important to have common, consistent equipment for them to utilize during their didactic and clinical training. And so asking that rate increase to provide that, make sure that it's quality instrumentation that they're utilizing and that it lasts the entire training period. The last one that we have is our Professional Master of Business Administration, our online program. We've not increased that fee since 2013. And this would go then a 10% increase, which is actually less than what we've seen some of our other competitive institutions increase their fee for that online program. And so this would obviously then covers all the costs that we incur to offer that program as a self-supporting program at the College of Business. And with that, questions, comments? Regent Winter, I wanted to maybe preemptively address your scholarship question. And so that was actually one of the data points that we talked a lot about with the students is our efforts to increase our scholarships. And so from fall 22 to fall 23, we were able to secure a 6% increase in scholarships for our students to where about 6,600 of our students receive some type of a scholarship at the university.
Terrific, thank you.
Right. Other questions for Ethan and K-State? Yes, Regent Winter.
Just a comment and congratulations. With some very talented staff help, I have a chart here that shows the percentage increase in tuition over the last 6 years compared, and assuming that the requested increase is approved, comparing that with the inflation rate during that same period. And your rate of increase in tuition is 7.5% during that 6-year period, and the CPIU increase is 21%. So that's very admirable. You've done very good work to keep that in control.
Well, I appreciate that. And candidly, it has required a lot of belt tightening over that period of time. I don't want to lose sight of that. And has, we have reduced services, staffing, but we did feel it was important to try to do exactly what you say, try to maintain as competitive a tuition as we could.
Yes, Regent
Yeah, well, it's just you and Jeff doing the presentation so far. With all that's happening in college athletics now and what may get through Congress and things, how much of that cost, especially when you get into the payment of the student athletes, is going to come back on the university, or is that all going to be stayed in the athletic department as we go forward in all this? Werner, I don't know how much of it'll be Division I versus Division II, but is that something that we're all going to have to deal with at some point in time? As far as the cost to these student athletes?
You couldn't ask that question when Jeff was up here?
Yeah, it was to both of you.
Okay. I think we're on the very,
His red and blue tie is
yeah.
purple from here, so I'm a little,
we all have a little bit of purple in us, right? I think that's a question that we're still trying to wrestle with. What are the implications? How are the different lawsuits going to come down? And what are the financial implications to the athletics department? There's different calculations that we could deploy. All of those are multi-million-dollar impacts. Right now, our athletics department is wholly self-supporting, and so we don't have any student fees that go towards it, university support that goes towards it. So the strategies, we're going to have to work through how to really keep that athletics department in a competitive state. There's a lot to be talked through, unfortunately, and we just don't have a lot of the answers yet.
is it something that we will be asked to do? Will it stay within the athletic department? Is it something we need to be thinking about, especially coming into the budget workshop this summer? And whether it's this summer or next, or,
Yeah.
this seems to be moving really quick.
This just hit the news a few days ago, so we're all still processing it. We're both one of the few universities in the country that the athletic departments are self-supporting. They pay their own scholarships, they pay their own housing, and all that type of thing. And so we don't know the impact of this. You don't know, do you have to pay the rower the same as a star football player? You just don't know what that means. And so we're all going to be looking at that, and hopefully you can keep it within your athletics department. That's what we would all hope for. But this is going to affect all universities. All NCAA universities are going to have to figure this out, because we don't have that budgeted now in any athletic budget in any place in the United States. So this is just going to be a journey we're going to have to all figure it out. But it just hit the news a few days ago, and Ethan called me, sent me a text message. What are you doing? I don't know. What are you doing? I mean, we got to figure it out.
Okay.
Right. Any other questions? I know we still have 4 proposals to hear in the next 50 minutes. Any other questions? All right. Thanks so much, Ethan. All right. Next up, Fort Hays State University, Wesley Winch. Welcome.
Thank you. I'll try to move things along maybe a little more quickly. I've got notes here, but I might just, anyway, try to keep it moving. Morning, my name is Wesley Winch. Glad to be with you today. Let's see. All right.
There you go.
There we go. Perfect. That's all right. We can go from there. So first thing, mission statement. So just wanted to recognize that our mission is to provide accessible quality education. And we take seriously the cost of education and the access side of that. And at Fort Hays State University, and have for a long time. Wanted to also mention that we have a process for this, for setting these tuition and fees. There's a whole budget committee. It includes senior leadership and shared governance from faculty, staff, and students. And we discussed this at length and in depth, the budget, and we get recommendations from the committee. And so what you see today is actually coming from that committee, the recommendation, and from the committee as a whole, and wasn't done it was done very university-wide. Going to here, I want to talk first about fees and on what we're thinking on the fee side of things. And to do that, I actually am going to have our Student Government Association President Ella Burrows come forward. a lot of the fees that is done at Fort Hays State is done through a process from our Student Government Association. And Ella's been a real delight to work with this year, and I get the good fortune of getting to work with her again. So we'll turn some time over to talk about how the fees were come through to Ella.
Thank you. So good morning, Regents. Like Wesley said, my name is Ella Burrows. I'm the current student body president for Fort Hays. It's a real honor and a privilege to be able to work on our student fees and be before you today. So as you can see, we have quite a range of student fees. Ours are broken up pretty individually. In the past, I don't know if you guys have been here in the past, but we used to do a biannual fee review schedule. So we did not review our fees every year. So this is the first year that we're reviewing all of our fees at once. We made this shift because we think it allows us to make more informed decisions that can best meet the needs of our students. So we're really pleased with what we were able to do this year. As for our process, when we look at our student fees, that process starts in late November, early December. Each of the entities that are listed here that receive student fee monies are required to submit a status report and a fee request to our Legislative and Political Action Committee, which is one of the committees on our Student Government Association. The committee then holds hearings with each of our entities and then presents a recommendation to our Student Senate. Once that recommendation is passed by Senate, it's signed by me and then by President Mason, which brings us here today. As you can see, there's not really a huge change in our fees this year. We did terminate our public safety and awareness fee because that money just wasn't really being utilized in the best interests of students. So we reallocated that 21 cents, which you'll see throughout our fees. So some of our entities that got increases include like our Tiger Debs, SGA, Tiger Media Network, and then our student health. We also added a 2% inflationary increase across the board. So each of our entities received a 2% inflationary increase, which we hope will offset the costs of rising inflation and ensure that we can continue providing quality services to our students. So that comes out to a 78-cent increase per credit hour, which is about $12 total in our fee increase, which we're really proud of. We think it allows us to continue providing high quality services while maintaining affordability for our students. So I'm happy to answer any questions about fees or about our tuition proposal. As Wesley said, I was on the budget committee for the second year, so that's been a really interesting thing to see how that process works at a large level. As a student, I understand why Fort Hays needs to have a tuition increase, but it's a little bit scary when you're the one who's fitting that bill. So I just encourage all of you to keep that in mind as you're looking at these tuition fee proposals, that students are the ones who are paying for this.
Absolutely. Yeah, that should be at the forefront. All right, great job, Ella. Questions for Ella? Wow, you must have covered it really well.
Good job.
Well done.
Thank you, Ella. Appreciate that, and appreciate our Student Government Association. They do a good job for us at Fort Hays State University. All right, so this is now a table that shows that what we are proposing for tuition increases. Resident undergrad would go up to $8.88. When you add the fee went to your place, it's $9.66 on a semester basis. That's about $147 per semester is what the increase is here. And I want to talk a little bit about what precipitated and why we feel we need to have this increase. So starting off with what we're hoping to do and then explaining what the reasons why. So there's been some market challenges. We had a number of market challenges, not that different from what you've heard from others. Inflationary pressures, our workforce pressures on salaries and wages, some shifts in the enrollment market for us, and some unknown impacts from FAFSA to other areas on campus and other things happening in the market. Want to talk a little bit on inflationary pressures. You've got the chart in front of you, so this is probably unnecessary, but just like everyone, we are dealing with inflationary challenges for software, utilities, insurance. We could get into specific numbers if you want to know them, but realize that those are very real for all of us, and we're not different at Fort Hays State University. And while we're dedicated to be a low-cost, high-value provider to provide access to our students, there is a point where it's difficult to hold your tuition flat for under these pressures. So that's part of the reason. Other areas is we have decreasing enrollment. Wish that wasn't the case, but we've had enrollment declines, and that has put pressure on our budgets. We with our revenues, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing to offset that on campus with the next slide, but realize that that's real for us. So our budget plan to deal with what's happening in the market and what's happening with our enrollment is that we have been cutting positions. We've been cutting budgets already on campus over the last few years. Over the last 5 years, we've cut over $7 million in our ongoing budget out of already. And that has 60 positions have been reduced on our campus to meet the declines in enrollment, declines in budget this way. We take a very conservative approach to our fiscal management on campus. And so that's one side. We're working on the budget side of things. The other lever we're doing is we're trying to help with our enrollment. And so we have a lot of plans to help with our enrollment and shore that up. Those include strategic enrollment initiatives that we've been doing. We have some of those have had some good success in social work. We've seen that. We're also helping with student success. We've invested in our student success and centralized advising and some number of other student success initiatives, and we've seen some success in that. Our retention rate has gone up 1% this last year. We're up to 76% in retention, so we're seeing some success on that side of things to help with the enrollment, shoring up the enrollment. And we also have some other strategic initiatives like the PCE, professional continuing education, that we hope will bring in more enrollment in the future and more streams of revenue in different areas. We also did a market study compared to this is where we sit in the market for our tuition and fees. This is versus the MIAA. We are significantly less than anywhere else in the market, and so we feel like there's some room in the budget, in the market analysis, for us to go up on our tuition and fees and not be and not really affect our enrollment. This is the other thing we did. We had a tuition and fee elasticity study that we performed, and anything less than 1 is fairly inelastic. Anything over 1 is elastic, which means that if you raise the price, are your students going to go other places? And we came in at 0.775. So our students tend to stick. We don't believe that this is going to have a major impact on our, that the enrollment challenges we have are not because of our price, basically. It's other areas that we're working on. So with that, this is wow, that came off really small. This is our F1. You guys have our F1, but this is how we're planning to spend the dollars. The legislature has been very good to Fort Hays State this year. We're very grateful for the state and the funding they have given us. There's a recognition, though, that most of the stuff that we were given was earmarked. It was for specific things. And so if we get $400,000 for nursing, we've got to spend that $400,000 in nursing. It really doesn't go back to help us with these other market pressures that are happening on campus and the inflationary challenges. And so you'll see a lot of stuff that goes in and out there. I could go through these on more of a one-on-one basis if you'd like to, but most of those ins on the top have an out on the bottom, because what they give us is what we have to spend on those things that we promised. In regards to the merit increase and the fringe allocation, you'll see that there is the state only gives us a portion of the necessary expenses of that. So there's a little of that we have to come out of pocket, about $142,000 on the benefits and $500,000 or so on the, a little over $500,000 on the 2.5% merit salary increases. We, just like everyone else, are struggling with our workforce development. So you'll see some dollars in there for market challenges. We did do a market study last summer on our employment wages, and found out that 250 of our roughly 860 employees were behind market, significantly behind market, and that we needed about $1 million to just put them up to the entry point level of the market ranges. And so we do have a plan. It's targeted. We know exactly what we're doing, and we're trying to put some dollars into making that happen to keep our workforce and keep our turnover rates and the people that we need to do the jobs on campus in place. So there's that. And then we have one other final request. Oh, one thing back on this. I wanted to note that even amidst all of this all of our plan, we're going to have to do some more budget cutting. $825,000 is still planned for this coming year of some budget reductions that we're going to find on campus. So that is already in our budget, that in order to keep us balanced and in a good place, we're going to have to do some belt tightening. We feel like that's doable, and we have a plan to get there, but just recognize that that is part of our budget plan, is that we're going to have to do some reductions as is. And the last request, which is kind of a little bit to the side, is that you may know that we have an affiliation that's going on. We're hopeful. We believe that it will be approved fully by HLC and all parties this summer, and it will become very, very much official. As part of that, our employees of all three institutions have been clamoring for this ability to have a reciprocal tuition waiver program for employees to go and get their education. If you're a Fort Hays State employee and you want to go get your education at NCK Tech and get your CDL, you could do it, and vice versa. And so we would like to do that. We'd like to set up a reciprocal tuition waiver program for our affiliates, where students and where our employees and their spouses can come and get their education at any of those colleges and any of those institutions. And we think it's unifying for our employees. We think it's good for morale. And we actually think that it'll make it so that those who get training are better ready and better prepared to do what the jobs they need to do on campus. And so those are some of the reasons. We did look at the cost. The cost of the waivers for this, we believe, will be somewhere about $70,000 a year, which we are prepared to do. So that is very fast. Went through that very quickly, but what questions do you have for either myself or Ella on this? Yes, what questions do you guys have?
Like how he's ready to defer to Ella. Yeah.
Well, if I was announcing budget cuts, I'd have Ellen.
Regent Parasker.
Let's start with this. When that's totally understandable with exchanged employees getting the credit hours. Do we have any kind of an understanding that they would stick with the universities post that education?
The current tuition and fee program does not have that type of stipulation where if they get it, that they agree to stay on for a number of years. So that is not currently in the program.
I'm all in for educating our employees and giving that for pretty much $0, but that should have a return of investment on the university. And the way I can think of, and you don't have to follow exactly that, is if they don't stick around for X number of, a year, depending on how much we have waived their fees, maybe we are expecting them to pay back a percentage of it if they're leaving. That would be some kind of a tie-in. But if they're with, absolutely educate our employees and bring more. So that's one suggestion or advice this slide is very powerful.
Mhm. Yeah.
And even with this, we are seeing reduction in our enrollments. So that tells me that we are not spreading this far and wide for Fort Hays. There's not much, even within the state and, leave alone. Do we have any initiatives? Something that I can think of is absolutely low cost is social media. Do we have any emphasis on increasing awareness of this obviously very powerful slide?
Yeah, we've been working with our marketing team and our recruiting team, and we do use social media. There's a lot of initiatives we have that use social media and online marketing presence to try to get as many people here as we can. And we focus on the 13 state region around us to try to get as many of those students to understand that this is a great quality education at a great value. And so yes, we are doing much on social media. Could we do more? Probably.
Another suggestion that I can think of is how about tying it up with the sales, right? Obviously, if it's an employee of our university, they're doing their job to get that information out. But if we are working with a third party and saying that you'll be paid when we see the results, right? And I'm pretty sure there'll be, whether it is other people, students who've left, alumni, or anybody who's tied in and say, okay, I'm bringing a student in, here's my cut in it,
Hmm.
right? So you're not paying anything till you see the return on investment for you, right? So I think we can do better there.
I appreciate the suggestion. I will definitely bring that back to our marketing folks and say, look, maybe there's a different way to structure these. So instead of just
Incentives.
paying on a per click or a campaign basis,
Exactly.
be paid it differently. Mhm.
Perfect. Thank you.
And Wesley, just for clarification, if you were to be, if the tuition increase that you're requesting was approved, would you still be the lowest?
We would still be the lowest by close to $1,000 a year. Would still be much lower than everyone else.
Yeah.
That's your key.
All right, other questions, Regent Winter?
Thank you. Wesley, are the cuts that you mentioned, are those public, or at least the highlights? Have you made the fact that you're making cuts public?
Public in the sense of, we've talked to our budget committee, and every member of our budget committee was part of that, which includes senior leadership and student government. So this is public internally, at least. I don't know that we've had a press release or something, but we definitely have internally, people know.
Can you tell us in 30 seconds or less where those cuts, just generally speaking, where those are coming from?
We have a number of ideas of initiatives. One of them is we're going to have to take a look at the efficiencies we have in our operating. Some of it might be that we're projecting that our enrollment will be down. If it doesn't come in quite as low as we were projecting, if we're actually higher than our projections, then there won't be necessary to have some of those cuts. But we're looking at our software budgets, and there's some of the budgets in software where we have to have it, our ERP systems, our learning management systems, but there's other software that is sometimes used around campus that maybe there's some areas there where we can have some efficiencies. And ultimately, when we're probably going to it's going to have to end up being positions at some level. Where 60% of us is our employees. I don't know how to say it other than that. We're hoping not to have to do it through pink slips or anything. It's just through attrition as people leave. We may not just fill in some of those places and do it as more of a gentle way.
Well, let me say that I appreciate and share the difficulty that you all have in addressing revenue shortfalls, et cetera, et cetera. And understanding that we have to be careful about not expressing these problems widely without an explanation. I do think it's important to publicize these with the legislators, with others, because sometimes I think legislators and the public think that universities are places that dollars go to get burned up, and there's not much fiscal discipline. This fiscal discipline that you have to demonstrate is very important and is necessary, and I think higher education in Kansas should be proud of the fact that we have universities that face up to these things. When cuts are needed, we make them. I think that kind of begets responsibility and a positive response from the governor's office and legislators and the public.
Any other questions for Wesley this morning? All right, great job, Wesley.
Thank you.
Next up, Emporia State University, Angela Wogren. Welcome, Angela.
Bring that down a little bit. Good morning. We're here to present today Emporia State University's tuition request. Did I do that right? At ESU, our tuition and fee setting process is coordinated by our University Tuition and Fee Advisory Committee. It includes 18 members, staff, faculty, and students. We meet several times throughout the year as we discuss different elements of our tuition and fees. As we consider our campus activity fees, which are direct request, our largest portion of our fees are direct requests from student health services, student counseling, student union, student rec center, athletics, and the Memorial Union. We also have a large portion of that that is controlled by our associated student government. And those line items are through their process. So I'm going to introduce Sophia Dawson. She is our outgoing ASG president. She came to us as a junior from Butler County Community College. She is a recent graduate from Emporia State and a bachelor's of business administration with a concentration in human resource management, and is continuing her studies at KU next year to receive her bachelor or master's degree in higher education administration. In talking to her about her journey through higher education, it just solidifies the importance of keeping higher education affordable. Because like me, the aid that we received, whether it was need-based or talent-based in the form of scholarships, were key in helping us attain our degrees. So with that, I'm going to let Sophia talk.
Good morning, Regents. As Angela said, my name is Sophia Dawson, and I'm an excited recent graduate of Emporia State. I'm still got that graduate pep in my step this week. So I'm really excited to be here before you. Thank you. So I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of how the side I see, the student Senate sees of the fee review process. So our representation begins with having several students on the Tuition and Fees Advisory Committee meeting throughout the year. But our process begins early in the fall when our ASG Fiscal Affairs Committee begins to review the 13 line item organizations that exist within our student activity fee. Each of these line item organizations are required to submit what we call a fee maintenance packet, which is where they disclose how much carry forward they have in their budget, what they use those fee dollars for. We take specific interest in seeing how many students they employ and what student scholarship dollars and which dollars directly go back and benefit the students. Those are specific things that our Fiscal Affairs Committee looks for. If there are any, once the process is concluded, there is a bill submitted to the Senate that runs through any increases or decreases or just the maintenance activity of that fee. The Student Senate votes on that bill, and then ASG submits those materials to the Tuition and Fee Advisory Committee just for their information to review what fee maintenance or increase or decreases that the Student Senate reviewed and or approved. That's it.
So the committee recommended this year two pieces. So an undergraduate tuition increase of 4% with a graduate increase of 2%, or an annual increase of $228 for an undergraduate student and $138 for our graduate students. There was a request from the Memorial Union for an operating increase. They actually withdrew that request prior to us voting on it. So at this point, our Tuition and Fees Committee did not have any fee increases to approve. So we had 0. However, as we are requesting the 4% and the 2% increase, we actually also will be reducing our fees. As a result of our legislative request that was put forward by KBOR related to our student affordability, it was approved by both the governor and the legislature this spring. And so therefore it will result in a reduction of fees that our students will be paying related to the debt issuance for the Memorial Union bond remodel. So our combined goal is always affordability for all students. So our students will actually be paying less next year to attend ESU than they did this fall. For undergraduate students, that would be a 29% or $29 decrease, and graduate students, $218 if they take 12 credit hours. We had no departmental requests for adjustments coming forward. So I do want to point out for ESU, we also have had no increases. 3 out of the last 5 years, we did not have a tuition increase. And students, as well as the committee, were very supportive of the tuition increase that we have put forward in front of you today. I didn't put it in the slides because I sent it in the information Friday. compared to our designated peers, our aspirational peers, our MIAA, ESU would remain in the same place on those charts, even with this 4% increase on our undergraduates. So with the MIAA, you saw Hayes is at the bottom, we're right above them. And then on our designated and aspirational peer, we remain at the bottom as the most affordable in that group. This is but one piece of the whole process as we work through how to finance our operations for next fiscal year, but also it's a very important piece as we're estimating what our tuition revenues might be. We have built our budget with the assumption that we will have an additional $600,000 in tuition revenue. However, if we do not receive that increase, we would adjust through other budget reallocations or cash reserves if necessary. Our goal is to build a balanced budget. That's kind of in my presentation, but I know that you asked about scholarships. The foundation has committed for the next 3 years for us to help us fund and incentivize over $8 million of new scholarships opportunities at ESU. So we are taking that very seriously, and they have stepped up to the plate in helping us do that as well. We also do pay a company right now, it's called Re-Up. They go out and try to bring back students who have dropped out or have sat out for a while, and we don't pay them unless they actually come back to campus. So similar to what your question was earlier. So we are doing this all as a very strategic approach. We're not just looking at what our tuition increase is. We are looking at our enrollment, what we can do differently, how we balance the budget through this process. We've spent countless hours recently with leadership, 20-some people in a room who I'm sure are tired of hearing me talk about how we're going to balance the budget next year and how we're going to build that budget and what it's going to look like. So I stand for any questions, Sophie and I.
So even with a 4% tuition increase, the overall net result is a decrease in the cost of going to school in Emporia State. Well done. Well done.
To mention that in the fall, when the Student Senate received those fee maintenance packets, we did have 3 organizations that asked for an increase, but the committee did decline those. And we were just looking at sort of the student involvement, student usage, and reminding them to spend conservatively and also stay true to like what their purpose was as an organization. So students are also on that same page of spending in a fiscally responsible manner and increasing where it's going to benefit the most students for the most common good.
Very good. All right, questions? No questions. Well done. Well, congratulations, Sophia. I can attest, I was there. I saw her graduate. So well done. Congratulations to you. Next up, Pittsburgh State University, Doug Ball.
All right. Good morning. You'll again hear some common messages, but we'll try to focus in on some of the things that might be a bit unique for Pitt State. I'll hit on the high points, but don't hesitate to ask questions. I'm sure you won't. We'll start with just some comparisons. You've seen this data before, but just as a reminder, we do remain very affordable relative to 2 different variations of similar or related institutions, but particularly related to that peer group, which are institutions that have similar types of programs and are of a similar nature. We continue to be highly affordable. Similar to the story you've heard, I think 4 times now, there are both good and bad things that we saw coming out of the legislative funding this year. Certainly some big wins on some targeted areas that will be really beneficial to the university, but also some gaps that will cause challenges as we put the budget together and finalize it. And like you've already heard, those things are inflation and salaries, right? Inflation pressures are real, so we are having to manage those with other adaptations in the budget to make them work. But particularly noteworthy for us, and I think for the others who've spoken before, are the challenges on the salary front. You know, in our case, those funds appropriated by the legislature, which some is certainly better than none, but they will cover about 1.5% increases on average across our general use employee group. And that's frankly just not enough. And so we've got some targeted areas that we hope to do more. We've not finalized those decisions as we put the pieces to the budget together, but we're certainly targeting low wage positions, positions where we've got the greatest gap to market or to other reference points, and then certainly some hope of raising that 1.5% to something just a bit higher. And so that'll take some work in the budget as well as tuition funds to make that a reality. Here is the amount of our increase that we are requesting. And so this shows both tuition and fees. So in total for undergraduates, we're asking for an increase that will total $122 more than it was in the prior year. That's a 3% increase on a total tuition and fee basis. It is 3.5% for tuition only, but 3% on an aggregated basis. And the same percentage, a few dollars more on the graduate side. We are making a lot of investments in order to improve the experience students have and the results that they experience. We don't have time to talk about all of those, but I did want to highlight two of them that are particularly relevant to student achievement. On the right-hand side, our efforts in the student success space are showing some real promise and real progress. And so we made significant investments there, well above what the legislature funded to help start that program. And we are seeing improvements in retention rates among those students who are participating in the student success efforts. And so we're encouraged, right? It's still early, but we are very encouraged. Those costs will continue to grow. This past year, we really focused on freshmen and sophomore through the centralized and coordinated advising services. We will expand that to juniors in the coming year, but that means more staff and more resources needed to do that. And then on the left-hand side, going hand in hand with the Student Success Center is really a rethinking of the way that we manage and coordinate and present scholarship and other forms of financial assistance to our students. We were a little behind the times, frankly, in the way that we presented that to students. Because of that, it wasn't as coordinated and as effective as it needs to be. And so we're making some changes there under the umbrella of the Great Gorilla Scholarship Program. That's kind of a broad strategic approach to utilizing all of those different funding sources we have available to us, but coordinating them in a way where they can be the most effective and do the most good for the most students possible. That will include larger awards for certain student groups where we think we can be more competitive, and we are not today, as well as being more consistent in offering and communicating to prospective students 4 years of scholarship commitment, something that almost everybody else does, but we have not in the recent past. And so we're making those changes through this process, but that will cost more money over time, and we'll accumulate that from a variety of sources. Finally, on the specific program fee, we really just have one primary area that we have a program-specific fee. That's in our College of Technology. That's an area that's challenging from a number of regards. It is both a really high value program for students in that those programs have very high placement rates and very high salaries upon graduation, much higher than the average program at Pittsburgh State. So they're of great value to students, but they also are extremely costly to deliver to students, right? The cost of delivering programs in the College of Technology is 40% higher than it is for the average program at Pitt State. And that's after 5 years of cost improvement that we've made through a variety of efforts. And so we currently subsidize those programs to the tune of $3 million a year. What I mean by subsidize in this sense is that the direct cost, not even any overhead or facilities, just the direct cost of delivering those programs is $3 million more than the tuition and fees that we collect for those programs. And we have no intentions really of trying to drive that subsidy to zero, but we certainly want to move it in a positive direction, take another step forward in reducing the amount that it takes to offer those programs. So there's a multifaceted plan where we will rely on donors and industry partners and continuing efficiency efforts. But we do think our College of Technology fee needs to be a contributor, a part of that overall plan. And so we are proposing an increase, really a first step of an increase towards maybe a longer range plan. Again, our current fee is $240 to semester. Comparisons are challenging because the programs in our College of Technology are fairly unique. There aren't a lot of apples to apples comparisons, right? The closest reference point we have in the state, and it's not an apples to apples comparison, but if you look at the engineering programs at KU, K-State, or Wichita State, those programs would have comparable fees in the neighborhood of $100 a credit hour. So think $1,500 for a full-time 15-hour student. Now, we shouldn't be there, right? Those programs are even more costly to deliver. That's a reference point we can use to think about where we stand. And so through kind of that analysis, looking at other smaller institutions and all the other information I mentioned, we've really set as a tentative long-term target something in the $500 to $700 per semester neighborhood. Now, we're not certain that's exactly the right number, but that's our best kind of estimate today. And so we'd like to take a first step down that path this year, move from $240 a semester to $300, carefully monitor the impact that that has on students and on the performance of the college. And then if it seems advisable, continue to make steps towards that long-term goal over several years. All right, with that, I want to hand off to Jabin Parnell, who's going to talk a little bit about some exciting student fee stuff.
Well, good morning. Thank you guys for having me. I'm going to kind of go over things fast. I know that we don't have a ton of time, but one of the biggest thing that I want to highlight is that our campus fee is not changing, that there was not an increase at all. And the main thing with it is that it was student-led, student decided, and that also too, that we had some programs that took voluntary reductions in there, that they said that there's money that we don't need this year that we're willing for other places to use, which is honestly something that I just want to really say is a great thing that happened for our campus. So things that are increasing that we're able to give new money to. So one thing that was really great is that with our student health fee, with our partnership with the CHC, that we were able to have, I think it's 69 and 75 cents of a reduction that came from that. One of the questions with that, of course, is do we give that back to the students, or is this something that we redistribute? This is something that we did talk about in our finance committee that is led by people in SGA. And the students decided in that committee that it is best to reinvest this money into student programs to make sure that we're fully investing in our students, and also that the programs that we have, they're good for our students. So part of this is new student orientation. So if you one line item is our CARES program, which is what our students first have. It's their first experience with Pitt State whenever they get to campus. Their budget has been about the same for about 10 years. They have not had an increase for all this time. And now we're able to give support to them that's going to help better further students' first experiences on campus, which is great. Also, too, having an increase in our student programming at the Bicknell Center. The Bicknell Center is a wonderful facility. It's state of the art, something where even like institutions like Auburn University have come to study. And with these increases in these different places, we're going to be able to increase our different programming that happens there to help have our students have an even more enjoyable time on campus and to bring in more things that are a lot more attractive to our students. And also too, just a general increase in our student services for our students. And to kind of go on and touch on the next slide. So like that. So the main thing that I want to touch on here is in our student activities, almost every single place under our student activities is getting a 2.5% increase in their general money that they receive, as well as another 2.5 that's just going into our reserves with that. With this, all of our student activities are receiving some sort of increase, which is a huge win for our students. Also too, if you have any questions about the specifics on there, I know we are kind of short on time, but the main thing is that with this decrease that we had in our student health fee, that we were able to use this to really give support to a lot of our programs that have had to take cuts in the past few years, to where although they may that it looks like they may have stayed flat, ultimately they did have to take cuts. So instead of having these more cuts, we're able to give them support that they need, support that they've needed for a long time, to also help uplift these programs to where they need to be now. But if there are any questions about those specifically, I'm more than happy to answer them. But I will say that throughout this entire process, especially with our student fee, it is entirely student-led. The process that goes into it, with our committee, we spent multiple hours going over this, and then it was submitted to the President's Council. But after it was voted on in our Student Senate, it was unanimously approved, which I also want to highlight as well.
Absolutely. Great job. Great presentation. Regent Dykes.
Again, on the health and wellness, the decrease, seems like because one of the other schools had a decrease in health and wellness, which we tend to read the health and wellness of students is at a challenged level right now. And we're seeing cuts in that.
Yeah, so a lot of that comes from our partnership with the CHC. So before the Bryant Student Health Center, it was completely ran by the School of Pitt State, but now it is now taken under the CHC. And so the money that is coming from, or the money that's being reduced from that is the money that is being now provided from the CHC. So there is not a loss in programs, but rather it's just a decrease in what we're having to contribute to this, the community health center.
More people participate.
An organization we really contracted with a year ago to operate the Student Health Center. Unbelievable win-win in that really resources, the breadth of their resources far exceeded anything we could do internally. There's really a broader set of resources now available to students, and yet they can do it at a lower cost because of their scale and expertise.
That's a different organization. Yeah.
Generally, just to follow up on Regent's question. Is there another way to let us know the total dollar amount that's going with the new arrangement for health services? Is there a way to identify the total dollar amount of change that supports that function? That's all of us are concerned about student wellness and health from all the aspects, especially psychological counseling, mental health counseling. And we want to, that's why I think we're sensitive to make sure that you're really not cutting. In fact, hopefully you're finding a way to improve those services.
Sure. I guess I'm trying to think about the best way to answer that. We have a contractual agreement which kind of outlines the range of services that community health center provides to us. And there is a routine monitoring process where they report to our dean of students at the university, where they can monitor their performance in operating the health center and their services to students and resolve any questions that comes from it. That contract does lay out the financial payment that we make to them each year.
Are you telling us that in fact, the quantity and quality of health services to students will increase?
Yeah, and I can say, yeah.
I understand, yeah.
And one huge win for the students as well, especially in our health services, is that before we were not able to accept Medicare, Medicaid, and with the CHC, they are able to accept that. And so with the population of student being largely underserved, a lot of students are now able to receive services with those two different things.
That helps us understand.
Helps a ton.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well done. Thanks so much. All right, last but certainly not least, Wichita State University and Werner Groening is on the victory tour. Swan song. He's got one more meeting after this. Did you say a big grin?
Oh, yeah.
He knows he's almost done with us.
Good morning, regents and colleagues. I'm Werner Goling, Vice President for Administration and Finance at WSU. I'm joined by our new, and I'd like to introduce Executive Director of Budget, Lindsay Fletcher. She'll be at June's meeting and the budget workshop, so I'd like to introduce her. I'm also joined by Dr. Hall, our newly minted Dr. Fonseca, and 4 SGA great leadership students that we have here. This PowerPoint presentation will be the same one that Dr. President Mumo will be using this afternoon. I'll jump right into tuition. We're asking for a 3.9% tuition increase. The uses for this additional revenue that's generated will be on the following slides. But as the chart here shows, our tuition increases in the past, far past, have been pretty high. But in the past 5 years, if you look, our total increase is 8%, or an annual average of only 1.6%. You've heard a lot about our challenges with inflation and increased costs. I won't go through the specifics. We know how much inflation has cost, but has caused the institutions and infected the institutions. But I will say, even after this increase, we will be by far the lowest in our peer group and also our competitive group. University of Memphis in our peer group, right now we're $34 per credit hour lower. And in our competitive group, Oklahoma State, we're $30 per credit hour lower. We have a process. This proposed tuition increase has been vetted and discussed at the Budget Advisory Committee. That's a robust committee. SGA Student Fee Committee with SGA leadership, President Muma at town halls, meetings that President Muma and Dr. Hall have with student groups. This was made specifically for Regent Winter. No. You had asked this question, and actually, because this really addresses the accessibility and affordability of the tuition part, and we also have the resources available for students. This slide shows the various scholarship support that has unfortunately continued to grow. Importantly, we have and will continue to invest in strategic enrollment management, SEM, to include institutional scholars, and that's the light yellow bar portion that is shown there, as well as continuing to fund our other retention efforts. But as noted in our proposal, we're proposing to add $200,000 this year to the institutional aid. We'll bring our increase, that increase will bring our total to $10 million, which is significantly above the $2.6 million we started in 2016. And that represents about 10.3% of our tuition dollars being reinvested in our students. As well as many of the institutions, we've implemented budget cuts and reallocation each year from 2017 to 2022, resulting in total reductions and reallocations of $22.8 million. We reduced our GU funded positions by 184.5. And then for fiscal year 25, we're anticipating cutting budget and reallocations of $3 million. I will say, as I've reflected upon my time here, my 8th budget cycle at WSU, 6 of the years we've reallocated and cut budgets. Oh, I'm sorry, go back. I do want to highlight a couple items on here. We are very thankful for the additional resources allocated by the state for us, but it alone is not enough to move us forward on strategic initiatives, strategic enrollment management, and tackle the similar things that people have talked about, compensation and increased costs. I will note that state pay plan, that is for us, that 2.5% is a 1.5% salary pool. And we also we're in our 3rd year of market-based compensation implementation. We did a study, and this is our 3rd year of implementation, and we are $24 million short. I think Jeff at KU said 27 million approximately. So this is, I think, among all our institutions, something that we'll find. I will also say the tuition change in student mix, that's a credit hour issue. Our head count going into fiscal year 25, we anticipate, again, a strong head count. We've had record head counts for record credit hours, but it's the mix, what the students actually pay. And we're down on international graduate students. They are our highest paying segment. So we're estimating that we're going to be short there. Hopefully that will change, but for conservative budgeting, we're going into the year estimating we'll be down $2.5 million in that area.
Is any of that the I-35 change in out-of-state tuition, not just the international students?
No, that's been good. Actually, that's strong. We're up. I think I showed in our February meeting that consistently has gone up, and we, good 2020 hindsight, that was a very strong and important investment. We have 1,700 students that we probably wouldn't have at Wichita State because of the I-35 corridor and what we call Shocker City and Shocker Select pricing. Under the plan users, I'll just maybe just drop to the chase, and that's the bottom line. In order to make up for some of that tuition shortfall that we're anticipating, we've also done budget cuts and budget reallocations of a little over $3 million. And additional revenue, that's items like many of us have shared, items that 5 million that we received, the 1.5 and the 20.5, that will just be spent on the appropriate use. Mandatory student fees. Just start with student support services. You'll have a presentation by SGA President Okiri and SGA Treasurer Wang, and they'll talk specifically about that, so I won't steal their thunder. I will mention athletics. There's more of this outlined in detail in our proposal on page 83. There's a significant increase, and typically the athletic rate increase has mirrored our student support increase. Though not required to have student or SGA approval, traditionally the increase is vetted through students through their student fee process. So Kevin Saul, our Director of Athletics, presented at the Student Fee Committee, answered questions, and also met with SGA leadership. He shared the extensive comparative fee and support information. So this is institutional and fee support for institutions like us. So for example, in the American Athletic Conference, we are the lowest. And also, probably more importantly, is the 1A, the 1 AAA schools, non-football schools. We have a different mix of resources than many of the football schools. So this is to address that and enhance the program. We want a quality athletics program, and we need to continue to invest in that. And the students can talk to specifics about how they feel about that. We do have some other mandatory fees. We're asking for no increases on campus infrastructure, technology, or transportation fees. So overall, our tuition and mandatory fee increase would be 3.88%. So just a little under 3.9%. College fees, we have 3 of the 8 colleges asking for increase. College of Fine Arts, that's $1 per credit hour. College of Engineering is $3 per credit hour. And the Barton School of Business is $3 per credit hour. And there's more detail about what they'll do with those resources in program review. That is actually going to be covered by President Muma at the full board. Oops, go back. So now I'd like to introduce SGA President Okiri and SGA Treasurer Wang to the podium.
All right, welcome.
By the way, these are amazing students. Iris actually worked in the finance and administration office as a freshman. And we teased her about her incredible potential. She's from Dallas, so she's one of those students, Regent Dicus, she's from Dallas. She came up here because of tuition and the programs. And so we were just so happy for her to join us in our office as a freshman. And we could just see her blossom. And actually my assistant said to her, one day you are going to be student body president. And it happened.
Glad you're with us. Welcome.
Sorry, I'm real short, so I'll tippy-toe to get to here. Good morning. My name is Jiawen Wang. I was the student body treasurer for the 66th session and currently the 67th session of student government. So here's our budget development timeline. So in December of 2023, we sent out an email asking for departments to fill out the application. At the same time, we started looking for students to serve on the Student Fees Commission, where we train them on policies and funds. We also met with departments to learn more about what they do and how they utilize these funds. During these meetings, commissioners had the opportunity to ask plenty of questions. I also let them know that if they had any questions throughout the process, to please let me know so we could ask the departments before deliberations. We then started commission hearings and deliberations where we spent a total of 13 hours in presentations and 6 hours in deliberations. These recommendations were moved to Student Body Senate, where it was approved with no changes and approved by President Iris Okiri and then passed to President Muma. During the process, the commission wanted to decrease student fees initially, but when it came time to deliberations, we found that a decrease would ultimately hurt the student population and experience. So the commission decided that we wanted to keep the increase of student fees to be no more than 2%. We managed to do that barely just at 1.9% increase while also continuing the investment in students with services, scholarships, work opportunities, and balancing the growing expenditures. This translates into $7.78 increase per student in Tier 1 and changes by their tier. As I mentioned, the Student Fee Commission reviewed 13 funds in total, which focused on student services and educational opportunity funds. We also reviewed the following 3 compensation areas. The entire student fees process was spread out over 3 days, with the first 2 days focusing on presentations and the last day focused on deliberations only. During the deliberations process, we as a commission agreed that while we did not want to increase student fees, it was necessary to support the student population in their goals and achievements. Because of this, the commission discussed in length on how much we should raise, why we should or should not, and then ultimately voted based on these discussions. This process was led by students and approved by the students. The Student Fee Commission had a representative from each college, as well as the student body vice president, speaker of the Student Senate, and myself. Every hour spent in presentations and deliberations were live streamed and open to the public. The Student Senate had access to these live streams and adopted the student fees as presented with an 18-0 vote. I'll pass it on to President O'Keefe.
Okay, my name is Iris O'Carey. I had the pleasure of being the 117th student body president at Wichita State. Thank you for your time and consideration today. At WSU, we have the one fee that supports, if you go back, one fee that supports student services, in which splits 3 different ways. The athletics portion, which is proposing an increase of 17%, the SGA student service support portion, which is proposing 1.9% increase, and then the health and wellness portion, which is remaining flat. All in all, this all adds up to be about a 5.64% increase. The SGA governed portion of the fee is the SGA student support fee. The proposed increase included a general increase in the EOF fund of scholarship dollars and support students, and the general increase in other programs and salaries adjustments for positions funded by student fees. Overall, it's a $7.78 increase per student in Tier 1, and of course, that changes by how many credit hours that you are in. After Treasurer Ring completed the student fee hearing process, as student body president, and I addressed the Student Fees Commission and viewers that were watching, and inviting them to reach out to me regarding any of the fee increases. When this package was presented to the Student Senate for approval, there were no objections raised by the senators during the legislative process. Regarding the 17% increase in the athletics portion, both myself and my Vice President Martins and I were deeply involved in every discussion, ensuring that every question we had was addressed. This proposal was reviewed by the Student Fees Commission during student fees, live streamed meeting in compliance with the student fees policy, and the Student Senate as well, with the majority expressing support due to their appreciation for the significance of athletics and the traditions it fosters for the university's improvements. While nobody loves to see an increase, it's recognized by students that investments in the campus improvements and the enhancement of academics, the student experience often necessary such to adjust these things. Collaborating closely with administration, the university leadership, and athletics, I'm confident that the students understand the necessity of the increase, and we will stand for questions.
Well done. Any questions this afternoon? Regent Winter.
Could you comment about the health aspects of funding of health programs? We talked about that before.
So it's remaining flat for us this year because I think during the process, we didn't see a necessary increase to it necessarily this year, but it could potentially in the future.
Okay, thank you.
I would have the same question for Werner and Iris about the athletics that I asked KU and K-State earlier. Any concerns on how the NCAA things will affect Wichita State? And it appears you're more funded through the university than a standalone athletic department.
Yeah, we're pretty typical for one AAA institution that is non-football. And we actually, our student fees and institutional support puts us at the bottom third. And of course, we want programming and athletics to rise. But specifically to the new potential, we haven't really talked about it much, but it will obviously affect us probably even more greatly than institutions that are athletics are self-supporting.
Yeah, Regent Brasker.
Maybe for Warner, I see that students are involved in the fee discussions. Are they involved in the tuition increase discussions?
Yeah, students participate in the budget advisory committee as well.
Mhm.
And so that's a representation of administration, deans, faculty, staff, all the governance leadership. So faculty senate president, staff senate president, SGA as well. And so there's a broad representation, and we meet on a very regular basis throughout the budget cycle. In addition, we talk about it at the student fee committee as well. So yeah, it's vetted through a lot of different venues.
Other questions, clarifications regarding Wichita State?
Yep.
Hearing none. Great job.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to take advantage of the podium for a moment and just say, I have one more meeting and I'll be here in June, but this is one of the best parts of the job is working with these students. We also have Matthew and Sophie and working with student leadership, and the students that are in our office is probably one of the best parts of the job. It reminds us every day, even business officers, of why we're here.
Certainly. Well, you've done an incredible job, Warner, and I know you've been an instrumental component at Wichita State and been a big part of their progress. So thank you for all you've done and best wishes on a well-deserved retirement. Good see Regent. Absolutely. See Regent Winter's already getting a little choked up about it. Yeah. All right.
Blake, I got,
Yes, Regent Dykes.
yeah, we've got one of them left, but we have 3 students left in purple. And Ethan didn't let any of you come up and speak. Yeah.
Didn't let them or didn't make them? Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. Well,
Well, it is Caleb's birthday, so I'll take the
Oh.
opportunity to speak for a birthday present to him. We just didn't really have too much to say because we didn't have an increase. Our student services fee, or our student service fee committee is comprised of about 15 students. That, a diverse representation of our student body, and we didn't see the need to increase our fee this year. So yeah, we didn't have anything to present for that.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have any questions, I can.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And yeah. And happy birthday. Did you say it was Caleb's birthday? So happy birthday to Caleb. Could sing to him, but our gift will be that we won't sing to him. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Chad Bristow, any progress to report on State University deferred maintenance initiatives? No?
No.
Okay. All right. Elaine, any audits to come before the group?
We will be sending a note to one of the community colleges to request that they join us via Zoom at our June meeting to talk about their financial audit. So more to come there.
Sounds good. All right. Anything else to come before the committee this afternoon? All great information, and I really appreciate the CFOs and the students that joined us today and look forward to further conversation this afternoon. With that, yes, Regent Winter.
Kind of a administrative question. What is, I take it that we don't make a recommendation on these to the full board that we don't need to take any action, or do we?
Mr. Chairman, this is your opportunity to have a first read. And again, for those 5 regions who are not serving on fiscal affairs, it'll be their opportunity then this afternoon to hear directly again from the campuses. Our goal is for the board to hear directly from the schools, for you to get your questions answered so you have several weeks to ponder the requests, and your action will happen in June. It would be up to the committee to decide if you wanted to make a recommendation for the board at the June meeting.
And I asked the same question, and Elaine said sometimes fiscal affairs will make a recommendation if there's a consensus, but it's not always that way.
And what's your proposal?
I'd like to hear the conversation this afternoon and see where we are at that point. I think it's always advisable if fiscal affairs, if we feel like there's consensus. I think the full board appreciates that direction because they really charge us with kind of being the first line of defense for this. And I know they appreciate when we're able to make a recommendation, but I think we'll have a better feel for that after this afternoon.
Right. Well, let me say, I think that if I can,
Sure.
that the presentations, all of them were very well done. And I think that all the institutions paid a lot of attention to the importance when possible of holding down tuition increases. I appreciate the fact that there's obviously a lot of study and care and thought done with respect to this issue, especially from the student perspective. So I appreciate the students being here to weigh in on your views of this.
Yep, fantastic. All right, hearing no other business to come before the committee, we will adjourn. Full board meeting starts at 1:15 this afternoon. So thank you again.